Record.
Let's fly through skies in a stereo high with Brie from Double Eagle. The odds are good and we're feeling blue. With stims and boosters we know what to do. The Emperor always dies. Let's kill all we can and let's hear from
Hello, and everybody. Welcome back to my channel where we are talking to the amazing Dan Abnett. Hello, welcome back, Dan.
Well, thank you for having me back.
Yay! And we're going to be talking about two books today: Interceptor City, and of course the predecessor, Double Eagle. So, yeah, thank you for seeing me again, Dan. I love that this is our regular chat. And
So do I.
yeah, actually, this is one of the books that when we first started talking, you basically really advised this one, and you thought this would be a great one for me to read and a great one for us to chat about. I think this might be my favorite Warhammer book ever.
Well, there you go. My work is done.
Yeah, you can retire now.
Oh, yeah, and nor did I lie in my persuasive efforts. So there you go.
No, I really loved it. I mean, I enjoyed Double Eagle, but there was so much for me in Interceptor City, and wowie zowie, we'll talk about all the amazing stuff, but it was so much more than, a book about air combat in Warhammer. It was
yeah.
a million and one brilliant things, and setups and tension and character development and exploration. Oh my God. So now I'm like, well, I've wanted the Amazon deal to be about Horus Heresy. Now I want the Amazon deal to be about this one. So we'll see what's happening. But yeah, I love you, Dan. This is really fab.
Thank you.
I guess, this is 2024 it was published. So coming off the back of those last Horus Heresy books, and also a billion and one fans going, where's the next Beckwin?
Yeah.
And 20 years after Double Eagle, which is 2004. So could you set the scene about how this book came about and what you were doing at the time of writing it? And
Sure. Well, first of all, Double Eagle itself was a sort of sort of a throwaway thing. That is to say, even back then in 2004, there were certain things that I was writing then, like the Gaunts-adjacent series and the Eisenhorn books, or they probably become the Ravenel books by then. I can't remember exactly. But anyway, I was writing things that were like sort of fundamental product that I was producing for Black Library. And every now and then I'd fit in something else. I go, oh, I fancy a change. Can I do something else? So there were slightly more tangential projects. And Double Eagle was definitely one of those. Like later Titanicus, they're both nominally Sabbat World campaign books, so they tie into the Gaunt series. And in fact, Jagdeer appears for the first time in
Gaunts-adjacent.
Thank you. Yeah. So she was sort of a spin-off character, getting her own, as it were, her own, but as does Viltry, of course. So there are characters that it was like focusing on the air combat. I probably my generation, but I grew up fascinated by air combat and World War II dogfights and World War I dogfights, and my dad was massively keen on that sort of stuff and was a very keen model maker. Due to his age and his generation, he would make model Spitfires and stuff like that, and he was, so there was always that enthusiasm there, and for a long time I've been thinking, wouldn't it be fun to write an air combat book in the 40k universe, because it's something that I'm really interested in. And the opportunity came along with Double Eagle, and I just suggested this as a notion that it would be a fun thing to do, and they sort of jumped at it and they said yes, and it coincided with my visits up there, and it was one of the best experiences because I got a proper guided tour of Forge World with Tony Cottrell and the team. Ooh. Who were excited that I was going to write this book and wanted to show me everything and talk about how they imagined the planes working and all this kind of stuff, all sort of technical stuff. So I was getting it. I was sort of reproducing notes that they were giving. We've always thought it worked like this and this, and I was going, great, well, we'll put it in the book. So I really enjoyed writing it. And I hoped that it would be a success, because by the end of it, I thought, well, I hope people like this, because I'd like to write some more of them. I would like to do some more. And I could see potential. And Double Eagle is unashamedly the Battle of Britain in 40k terms. I mean, it really is a World War II air combat book dressed up in 40k costume. And I knew that when I was writing it, and I didn't care. Do you know what I mean? That you could essentially strip out all the nominally SF bits and turn it into a World War II story, and people would go, "I believe that." So I thought, if I write another one, I really ought to embrace the setting even more. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not saying Double Eagle's deficient, but it's a very conventional story. And I was thinking, yeah, I'd like to. What are the more SF? What are the more 40k SF things I could put into?
Yeah.
A follow up deliberately.
I'm glad that we did, because having a peer in Double Eagle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All of that.
That, beautiful and brilliant, but yeah, I can see.
I mean, it was deliberately. What I was deliberately trying to do was to hit certain sort of resonances that people associated with World War II eras, sort of Memphis Belle and the Battle of Britain and all those sorts of things, so that you knew where we were coming from in terms of that kind of stuff. And I thought that's great, but it is not necessarily representative of what air combat, the aeronautica, would be like overall in 40k. So I had this idea for a sequel, which from a very early stage was called Interceptor City, where I would deliberately increase the 40k value of the story and put them into an environment that was not anything real world in terms of the actual environment they were fighting in. So to put it within a hive, to have this extraordinarily claustrophobic idea of flying between things, which is, technically speaking, completely impossible. The idea of them sort of clinging to making their air bases in the tops of very tall buildings and then literally dropping off them like birds of prey, stooping to the kill and this kind of stuff. I thought, that's cool. That's very 40k. So by that stage, Double Eagle was out and proved to be a success, which is great. People really, really liked it. Not only did they like it at the time when it came out, but actually Double Eagle is one of those books, Titanicus is another, which has remained popular all the way through. People keep going back and saying, actually, that's my favorite book, which is very gratifying to know that there are people 20 years later who are Double Eagle to them is still, their favorite book, or let's say Titanicus is the other one. They're sort of standalone, but they are definitely 40k. They're connected to a big series, but they somehow, I don't know, maybe encapsulate something about a particular aspect of 40k that people really, really love. That this is how Titans work. This is how air combat works. Great. Yeah. So by then I was going, well, we definitely need to get that sequel written. This was a year or two afterwards, so about 2006, and it was commissioned. I wrote the outline, I sent it in. Black Library went, great, that'll be the next one. I still have somewhere the original commissioning form they sent me, all signed out, ready to go. That was going to happen. At the same time, the Horus Heresy was suddenly a thing, and was suddenly huge. And as happened with several other projects, actually, over the years of the Horus Heresy's lifetime, things got pushed because Heresy was more so. The Heresy was, it was very important because we had to keep that momentum going. And then if I wasn't working on the Heresy, then it was a Eisenhorn universe related thing, or it was Gaunts Ghosts or whatever. So those things that had been peripheral then got more peripheral. And whilst there was still an enthusiasm for them, they kept getting pushed back and back and back. And every time I thought, I'll finally write Intercept City, I've been meaning to do that for 5 years now, there'd be something else that, can we have this now? Because, it is a commercial enterprise. And Black Library says, if, we really would like you to do this thing, I'm going, of course I'll do that thing because you want it now. That can't, whereas this can wait. So that has proceeded for 20 years, but certainly for 15 of those years, it was like, I probably won't ever get to write that now, will I? But that's one of those books, and there are several which was going to happen, and then just fell to the bottom of the drawer, and it's like whatever. So we get to the point where we're into the Siege of Terror.
Yeah.
And around about that point,
it's my dues now. Give me my plain book.
It was partly that, but it was also partly that I developed with my then editor and also now with my current editor a cunning strategy, which is at any one point I will have a main book, a main project that I'm writing for Black Library, which is the one that they definitely want. And we'll also have commissioned simultaneously what we jokingly refer to as the background book. And I don't mean that in terms of its 40k background, but it's the book I'm doing in the background so that I'm never sitting around so quite often if they, it's like we want you to write a Siege of Terror book, but you can't start for 3 months because we're waiting for other things to get finished first.
Yeah.
So I will have a project that I'm working on, that I'll pick up and I'll work on and enjoy. And then they go, oh, we're ready for the Siege of Terror now. And I'll put it to one side and I'll write the Siege of Terror now. And then I'll go back to the background book until they're ready for the next thing like that. And that has happened now with there are 3 books like that, which
Wow.
I've sort of been written. They're the they're the secondary book that I pick up and put down again between the big, significant projects that they want me to do. That's great for me because it means that I'm not sitting around kicking my heels for ages.
Yeah.
It's great for them because it's making the most of my time. And anyway, after Saturnine, they said to me, I've finished Saturnine, and I said, what do you want me to do next? And they said, well, actually, we want you to write the last part of the Siege of Terror, but you can't do that for at least a year because. So I said, well, I'll do something else instead. And I did various bits and pieces, but I said, do you know what? And they said, and I think they were being nice to me. And there is that pain in the juice. They said, what do you want to do? And I said, do you know what? I want to write Interceptor City that I've been meaning to write for 20 years. So I started Interceptor City. I wrote about the third, maybe slightly more than a third of it, until it was time to start The End of the Death. When it was like, you may not begin that. So I then wrote The End of the Death for 18 months, delivered that, and then I came back to Interceptor City and finished it, so it worked like that. And various things happened in the course of doing that. One is, I can't tell you what an antidote to The End of the Death Interceptor City was as a book to come back to and to read again. It's very seldom that I leave anything for 18 months. Usually I write it and send it in, but it was going back to it and going, oh, wow, this is great. Playing with it, but having a time to reflect upon it and having sort of some of it's sat there and come back to it and thinking, oh, actually, this is pretty good, or I could change that now or whatever. But also it was the scope, the fact that it was literally a narrow claustrophobic book that was carried by one character. Most of the time, our POV is nothing more than her cockpit. And you know, we're tight in on that. It was such a relief after the ridiculous spectacle and scale of The End of the Death that it was what I needed to write. In fact, if I hadn't already been writing it, I would have said, can I write something like that? Because I needed to alter all the values of my perspective and the type of narrative I was writing to keep it focused, which is great for me.
You've described before, like the different camera lens and, you know, taking in the battlefield or.
Oh, God,
you know,
yeah.
So by the time we get to those last books of the Heresy, which I can't wait to get to, I'm on book 20, so 3 or 4 more years should do it. But there's so many to fit in, and you've got to fit it all like a jigsaw.
Oh, yeah. And without spoilers, The End of the Death is deliberately as big and ridiculous as it could possibly be.
Yay.
To do justice to the nature of it, so that there are so many story strands. We're changing perspective. We're changing the nature of the perspectives we get. There's monumental spectacle. There's all sorts of shifts in writing. There's so many things going on. So to come back and go, one character doing this, we see everything from her point of view. I never have to think about what I'm going to do next because it will involve her. What's she doing next? Okay, we're doing that. You know what I mean? Was like, oh God, it was therapy. Which is a fantastic thing to do. The other thing that has happened in the 20 years is, and this is genuine, the plot of the Interceptor City is essentially the same plot that I would have written 20 years ago. It is exactly the same story, except when I came back to it and I went, yeah, this still works. This is the book I've been meaning to write. I want to write this. I want to write the Dead Hive and them coming off these things in all this kind of stuff. All of that, absolutely, because it's much more SF. It's much more 40k to do it like that. The one thing I thought was, obviously by that stage, not only 20 years have passed for me, but the Gaunts Ghost continuity, which Jagdir's stories are nominally tied into, the Sabbath World Crusade, had also gone a long way. We got to the sort of a major punctuation point with Anarch, with the Gaunts Ghost story. And I thought, is it weird to go back and tell a story that is set in the past of something? And so the only change I made was to deliberately go, right, I'm just going to make it 20 years later. I'm going to bring her up to date, both in terms of Sabbath World's continuity and also where I am. And that to me was the thing that changed everything and made it such, for me, a pleasure to write, was the idea that she had left that long past. The Double Eagle was literally ancient history to her. So there was a sense of melancholy and nostalgia and stuff like that. And the idea that she had been out of that for so long that it was no longer part of her life, and she was doing a sort of comfortably mundane job, and then gets pulled. So once the story begins and she's delivering that plane at the beginning of Interceptor City, I wanted it to be like this kind of not roller coaster, but a slide that she's got on it, and suddenly everything is going, and there's not. It's like a dead drop. That once it started, there's nothing she can do to get out of it. She's pulled deeper and deeper into a situation that she doesn't want to be in, and she thought she had left behind 20 years earlier. And that, to me, was the thing that makes Interceptor City special to me, is the idea that it observes its own continuity and it works because it is 20 years later. The stuff in the early part of the book where she is reminiscing and remembering both the friendships and the traumas.
Yeah.
To me, much more meaningful than if it had been a year later and she was thinking about these things. You know, and again, no spoilers, but the moment she meets a character, the one moment in a cameo, she meets a character from the first book, was so meaningful.
Yeah.
Because it was like, oh my God, it's been 20 years. You know, that was, to me, that there's much more. So Double Eagle, I love it. Lots of emotion, multiple character strands in that, of course, because it moves between the different pilots. So then move it 20 years later to make it all about Jagdeer and the characters that she meets. So it's all literally, the plot is character driven by the people around her. It has much more emotional focus and emotional heart than Double Eagle, which was much more sort of gung ho and worked for Double Eagle. But that's what I loved about it. I love that essentially she's meeting these people. Can she trust them? Are they going to be her friend? Are they going to respect her? Are they going to hate her? You know, all that kind of stuff. I loved all that kind of. I suppose you could call it sort of cultural politics within that airbase about the people that she's getting to meet and how she slowly wins the trust of some or becomes rivals with others, and you know, all that kind of stuff. Which so that's when what I think was the same plot. It suddenly became an intense version of that same plot because it was her out on her own restarting it. So
it's a real treat to watch you take a character and give us a character study, because so often you are pulled apart into different characters. I absolutely loved her. There was this sense of ennui and, you know, some realism going on. We all knew the minute she accepted that ride, she wasn't coming back.
Oh God, yeah.
Just one last job. I think from the very moment we get into her brain, she's dry. Some of my favorite scenes is where she's kind of having to push away the advances of
I keep thinking of his call sign, Loppard. You mean?
Yes, Loppard.
Yeah.
I thought there were some moments where Loppard was kind of pursuing her, and it was just such brilliant observational writing of a woman who's in that era who's like, absolutely not. I'm not going to tolerate this at all, and hold her own. And being inside her brain, it was just a real treat. And I think getting to see you expand that. Also, things about the mundanity, the day to day. For some reason, you decided, oh, there's no water. And there was an emphasis on people not being able to shower. And then what would that smell like? And bringing that in. And from that, the relief of finally showering. Do you know what I mean? It was just a really beautiful slice of life. I felt really indulged by that, and getting to know the characters in the base, as you say, like the new pilots and the ones who are like, we're too good for them, they're all going to just die immediately.
Yeah.
And then having this juxtaposition of, well, there's so much going on that the only way people cope with it is by going and having these excessively chemical or alcohol-induced raves. It just felt like such a treat, because we don't normally get that kind of slice of life. We do see, I think in Titanicus, for example, we'll see a little slice of life. Oh, it's a married couple, one of them's got to go to fight. And you get a window into what life would be like, written by Dan Abnett. But I just thought, how lucky are we to get that from you?
Well, it was such a pleasure to write. I'm glad you enjoyed it. There were so many things there that it almost... the more I tried to think what it would be like to be there, it was like you said, it was the daily routines, it was the hierarchy of the people around, it was the ritual. Everything was so ritualistic. You know, the division between the God-fearing and the God-Emperor-fearing and the hedonistic, and the way that they're sort of blended somehow in the middle. The fact that it was so high stress with such a high mortality rate that they just had to blow off steam all the time. The fact they were in a really unusual environment, and also. And one of the aspects that I really enjoyed playing around with was the idea that she had been given this, you know, possibly the most sophisticated plane in the Aeronautica arsenal, which was entirely unsuited for the job.
Yeah.
Has to try and figure out how to train pilots to survive from her own experience, but also figure out ways of kind of modifying what she's doing.
Yeah,
So
with
she's got a
gaffer
chance-
tape.
with gaffer tape and so on. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I need to address this with you because obviously I do book club with Ian, I do club with my Patreons, and we were all like that bloody hydraulic light. None of us could sleep. We couldn't rest. Every page, what's going
Well,
on?
yeah, I mean, it is very much Chekhov's phaser. I mean, it's right there in the opening preface, the whole opening scene, which deliberately goes into ridiculous technical detail about every last thing that could possibly go wrong, but it's that one thing. And you know that is now going to hang over the entire book because it will. And then, well, again, no spoilers, but when it does finally do its thing, it does its thing in not the way you're expecting it. But yes, yeah. I mean, it is weirdly, I think it's simultaneously one of the most human 40k books I've written in terms of the people in it. But it's also because of that, maybe it's ridiculously brutal because when things happen, they're awful. They're just awful, and they don't happen. I'd like to think they don't happen in a kind of a heroic, dramatic sequence. So you think, oh yes, this is good. Oh, that's brilliant. This has happened, and then you go, oh well, too late.
There were some classic Dan moments where he's quite tall to be a pilot, and then
that was the one I was thinking of.
Yeah, and you've written those characters in such a way that it would make total sense, but you're rooting for them, but then the nature of the battle, the nature of the planes they've been given, the fact that it's kind of a wholly unprepared airfield at the beginning. Oh, it's just, this stuff's going to happen. It felt appropriate to the setting, and the stakes were obviously high, but it felt part of, as you say, the day-to-day routine.
Yeah, there is that, and there's also that peeling back of layers because they're also intensely closed people. They each present themselves as they are, and sort of, and I think that there's that idea during the course of the book that nobody ends up being really like her first impression of them, which I thought was quite an important thing. That actually there are, I wouldn't say moments. Well, for some people there are moments of redemption, but people who appear to be horrible aren't quite turn out to be surprisingly nice, and other people who are apparently nice turn out to be quite ruthless and so on. So I like that idea of she's literally sort of peeling back the thing to find out who they really are, and they show themselves in their true colors as they go along.
Yeah, I think it was brilliant. I think if this, wasn't a genre book, it would be up there. It's proper literary timelines, and people are changing and evolving. There's the boss that she can't trust, and then he turns out he's a good egg, and the amount of characters we had. I mean, there's even tiny little things like there's an Ogrin at the very beginning. My first one, Ogrin, and at the end comes into play a part. There's some really beautiful story crafting, which I thought was absolutely phenomenal. One of them is when Jagdir first arrives, she's absolutely taken aback because she just lands and a forklift picks her up and pulls the plane away. It's completely disrespectful as a pilot. She's not used to it. And she hates it. And then right at the end, she herself steps into that forklift and uses it in extremely, judicious way. And because I'm obviously looking and I'm a fangirl and I can see the story craft, but within that, the story seems to tell itself. It's not showy or flashy.
No, absolutely. There were certain decisions that I made in terms of the plot where I went, well, it's got to be that because that's exactly what would happen. That it's almost like the characters or the situation was showing me what something should be. So again, without trying to avoid spoilers necessarily, but a book like that written with a kind of dramatic mindset would have ended in a spectacular dogfight showdown between the two main characters, because that's how stories like that always end.
That's where you were leading me.
And it doesn't, despite the fact that one of the participants really wants it to, and she goes, "Screw you," and I think that's
punching the air at that stage. That was
so weirdly, on one hand, I didn't go for the obvious 40k climax of a story like that where she's so heroic that obviously we finagle it into this battle royale to the finish where the best person win, but at the same time it's very 40k in its kind of pragmatism. It's like, and that I quite like. We still get the big enormous dogfight finish, but it's not quite what we're expecting to when so you get the double whammy ending. But that was it. It was one of those things where I went, I think early on I was thinking, yeah, I've got to sort of somehow wangle this to set up what we, as it were, what we want to see. And then I went, that's going to be really, really contrived. And I went, no, that's not what we want to see. What we want to see is this concluded. We want to see her doing it her way. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Jagdeer is such a great character, long may she never retire. But it's interesting you're talking about the pragmatism of the Warhammer 40K. And also, I felt there was a real existentialism where there's kind of like some treatises on death,
Oh, God, yeah, yeah.
they are confronting death often with the tally chart, with the religious element, the rituals. I really loved that we got to look at that, not in a mawkish or dramatic way, but kind of matter of fact, or some of the characters even expounded on, I'm expecting to die. I thought that was, yeah, where did that come from? That was really, it felt kind of spiritual, Dan.
Well, it did. It did. I think that's one of the weird things. Actually, I have to say. I mean, I think there is a certain amount of that actually in the Gaunts-adjacent books too, because the soldiers, when they are in downtime, the infantry often talk about those sorts of things in different sort of ways. But I think it is particularly uh, uh, an attribute of air combat stories, and I've read a lot of either novels about air combat from Biggles onwards, but also into accounts of sort of combat tours of air pilots in Second World War or Vietnam or whatever like that. And the thing about air combat is that it's extremely fast. And I know this is true of the army as well, but within if you're an infantryman, you might be under fire for hours at a time, and then there might be sort of days sitting around, and then you advance and this kind of what I mean. But with the fighter pilots, so much of their time is spent waiting for the command to go, where they get to dwell on their thoughts, and it's incredibly tense. And then they go out there, and their sortie might only be 15 minutes, and almost too much and then they've got to come back again, and then they've got to wait to do it again. So it seems to me that the very nature of a fighter station primed on the front line like that is an awful lot of sitting around and contemplating what they're doing, which includes death and who's going to come back and who's not, and how random it's going to be. So I think that the existential element that you're talking about there is almost a natural part of an air combat story, because we see, I was going to say, what else are they going to do? We see them doing other things in order not to do that. And then some of them just can't help themselves, and they end up sitting there and dealing with it in whatever way they can and talking about it. And there's a lot of talk. Each one of them, all the veterans have a sort of burnout story about how what happened to them and why they ended up the way they did. And then you can see in the young ones, they haven't realized that that's what's going to happen to them, or they're just too terrified to even contemplate anything, or they are temporarily so lucky they don't think it will apply to them. I mean, Gangster's a great example of that. She's one of my favorite characters, but she is like enormously reckless and risk taking. And so far, it hasn't gone wrong for her particularly, and therefore she delights in it. She feels that immortality, which is I think is fun. I think they all. It's almost each one of the pilots represents a different way of approaching that, and it is true of anyone in frontline combat, be they ground crew or armor or whatever, that they will have that. But I think in air combat situations, it's sort of both stretched and telescoped. Do you know what I mean? It's intensified by the very nature of the way their tours of duty work.
Yeah.
Long periods of rest and waiting, and then short bursts of ridiculous, literally high speed intensity, and then back and then restarting again.
Yeah.
So I think that comes out of that, which is it makes it quite fun to write.
That pilot was one of my favorites too, and I loved how she had this disregard for danger and safety. Then she thought she had been responsible for friendly fire, and you see the aspect change, you see that growth and everything. So I thought that was really clever. And also, let's talk about my other favorite character, the Shred.
Yes.
So as somebody who regularly struggles with anxiety, this was so on the button. It was like kind of painful to read, but the way it was described, and it had its own kind of voice and character. Did you from that from your own experience? Because that just felt so uncannily like well written.
I suppose I did. I ended up doing it once I started doing it. I thought this is great. I have a talk about it, and then I was thinking, well, this is slightly at odds with Double Eagle, because obviously the same sorts of things were going on back then, but we didn't talk about it in that book. It's not so much a new concept so much as a new way of presenting the concept. And I thought, yeah, but 20 years have passed. This is a legacy, terminology's changed, and this kind of stuff. So I thought, no, let's do it. And once it started to be, it's like it's like the shred is there with her as a character, and as much as her plane is as well. The plane is has a personality all of its own, and it's like they're her companions all the way through it, and therefore it started to take on more of the shred, started to take on more and more of a personality. I didn't ever want to overdo it, and I didn't want it to get to the point where we felt that it was a gimmick, or even that it was something supernatural that might have chaos leanings or anything like that. I just wanted it to be this thing. She had personified that tension, and it had that sort of way of engaging with her and lurking there in the corner of her vision and saying the things it said and everything. So
I thought it was inspired as a perimenopausal woman who 20 years ago wouldn't have had a thing about the shred, would have had no fear. As someone who's kind of seen a lot of death and air combat, it made perfect sense to me. And then, a lot of it, she is isolated on her own. So there's an element which kind of goes a little bit horror-ish, where she's trapped with these dogs.
Yes, yeah.
And then,
the literal dog fight.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I didn't even think of that. That's brilliant. I thought that part of the character building, I thought she was so fully realized. I'm sure anyone else who reads the book who has anxiety will really, really recognize that feeling. So yeah, I just wanted to shout out for the shred. That was great.
Well, thank you. I mean, again, all the way through this, I think that's the other thing. Although the pilots can talk to each other, obviously over their intercoms, it is not like troops in a foxhole together who can talk to each other even under fire or be comradely. I think they're in one of the strengths that come out of the Gaunt books that people have talked to me about, including people who have served. And I always say that's what it's like, that camaraderie, that sort of mutual support, the guys together, which is, I think, is something very distinct for the true of ground troops in those sort of situations. The camaraderie of the pilots is different because there's also rivalry involved, and they are literally separated. It's harder for them, as it were, to stand with each other and reassure each other in the circumstances they're in. So it sort of changes all the values of what the combat experience is like. So the idea that she's trapped in a cockpit with her closest companion is her plane, which is sort of fighting against her, and then there's the shred lurking behind her somewhere. And then when she does finally end up in an environment that is more open, as you say, when she gets into that predicament, it's bad in different ways. It's like I've got room to move and there's air, but now, oh my god, So I like that. I like that sort of the idea that there's, like I said, it's that sense of the whole book being a slide, a dive, where no matter what she does, it's like, oh, I've escaped this. Oh, but now this, these consequences.
I mean, which is why I enjoyed it so much. There is a lot of action in this book, but it's delivered in short, sharp shocks. The other side of that is this investigation. A mystery becomes evident.
It is, yeah.
Ian and I had a good laugh saying she's the worst Columbo in the world. She goes up to everyone going, "I think you did it."
Yes.
But we get an amazing genre. We get this a noir detective story, so we get that. And then when we're talking about the dogs and the tower block, we're then into horror again. I got to that section quite late at night, which is a nightmare because you're staying up till you finish that section. You're not putting the dogs by the side of your bed and sleeping. There's a moment where you think, how is this going to work its way out? And it's the most jubilant, and then it swings back into an action movie. I just think, I know this is going to potentially be a little bit uncomfortable for me to say to you, but do you think this is the culmination of having written for so long, being able to kind of show all your different muscles in one book? The writing is, I mean, I wrote this book 10 years ago and it's a new edition. I couldn't really rewrite a lot of it. I was allowed to write some of it, but I was thinking, God, if I'd written this now. So do you feel that
well, yes, it's first of all, it's very kind of you to say that, and I sort of agree. I certainly was agreeing when I was writing it, because I was sort of intensely delighted which pushed me on to write the next bit, with the way the characters just worked, and it felt sort of effortless to make them do what they, that nothing seemed like, oh god, am I going to make this happen? Where am I going to go next? The movement between, like you said, between a genuine mystery, where she has to play the detective and isn't a detective. I didn't want to suddenly have her show ridiculous deductive skills. She's not a detective, and she just goes blundering in. She's clashing with all the personalities. She's also trying to be. She doesn't want to be in charge, but she knows she's sort of got to be in charge. All the stuff with the plane, all the stuff with the fact that, like I said, the combat missions are incredibly tight, but we always have that almost ridiculous repetition of routine. Her being lidded up by the engineer who says, "Done this, the first time, every single time, ridiculous." So we got this sense of it. It's like just another day. We're going out to doing something ridiculously dangerous. Yeah. So all these things were just building up over and over and over again, and then weaving together that it just, yes, I would say that in some respects I got to the end of that and went, wow, I could have written that story, but I've written it the way I've written it because I've got X amount of years experience now, and that's why it is so fluid. The only thing I would say is that I didn't want to stop at that point and go, well, I've done that now. So the 2 books I've written since then,
which are,
can't tell you, but they will be announced soon. But neither of them are anything like Interceptor City, except that I feel that they are also me hitting, I don't know, my whatever, late flowering, whatever it is, and drawing upon the skills that I've honed over doing this for 25 years and going, right, I'm writing this sort of book, but I'm doing it like this. So I can tell you one of the books is a multi-character Strand book, and I'm going, God, that's how I should have been doing it all this time. That's how you weave these things together. Oh my God. And then the other one is the most, if you think Intercept City is spare and lean, the other one, which I'm just finishing now, is the most pared down, ridiculously concise thing. And again, each one of them is me going, right, okay, another 40k book. This will be fun. What shall I write this time? Oh, wait a minute. I'm going to do it like this, but I'm going to do it like this, drawing upon, as it were, my box of tricks.
wow,
which I've realised, and I think it was Interceptor City, really. Interceptor City and The End of the Death, but The End of the Death was different because it was part of something else. But both of those books showed me, I suppose, that I did have a box of tricks. Do you know what I mean? I could be very calculating about things and go, how am I going to do this? And deliberately engineer mechanisms and then deploy them. So that's me blowing my trumpet much more than I would normally do, but you brought it up. But I think and that's been happening since.
We need to recognise it. I work for Lush, and the boss of Lush believes he is now in an age where he should be retired out, but he's having a purple patch, or creativity comes. And I think you can experience a renaissance at any time in life, or it comes. You've been doing so much for so long, and then your brain is like, well, let's push it out even more. Let's enjoy it. Let's expand. So
I think that's it. That's the only one. I mean, I am a notoriously prolific. We know this.
Yeah, and question about that. Yeah,
there is always the danger that if you do something for a very long time, it just becomes stale. And if it becomes stale, I suppose I can keep doing it and keep churning it out because it's product. But I would get bored, let alone the readers. So the idea that I sort of, as it were, deliberately set myself a goal each time how can I do this one and make it different, even in the way the story is told, and that is proving to be such a delight. And I know that. Certainly, there came a point in comics about 4 or 5 years ago where I knew as an absolute empirical certainty that I was writing better comics than I had been 10 years before. And that I'm now writing comics now better than the comics I wrote then. I believe that I might, this is not to denigrate my earlier books, things like Eisenhorn and the early Gaunts and stuff like that. I still love those books, and I still love that people love those books. They're great, solid adventure stories full of inventive things. Go ahead and read them. That's brilliant. But I am writing better books. I know I am.
Yeah.
So whether this is my purple patch, or I'd like to think of it as my, I don't know, puce or pink patch that suggests that I've still got a purple patch to go. Do you know what I mean? But no, there is it's not so much the stories, because you could keep crafting stories and characters and come up with good new solid plots. It's the execution of those things and the things you find to say. The fact that these 2 unnamed books that I can't necessarily specifically talk about, but that I in writing them, I'm going, this could be the same old, but I found things to do here found things to show you the 40k universe in ways that perhaps you haven't seen it before,
Oh my
even
God.
though it's something we have seen a lot.
A lot. Well, I mean, this is the absolute beauty of getting to check in and talk to you and go through your, even chronologically with heresy and stuff.
Yeah.
Because I get to see it and it's so aspirational and inspirational. And I'm so grateful that you're sharing it with us. You are never allowed to retire.
Oh, well, I don't intend to.
I've, I've got lots of questions from people. My first question is, we're so used to reading about combat on solid ground, but engaging stories about air warfare are much less common. How did you research air combat storytelling and where did you find inspiration? And that is, you've answered that a little bit. That's from Grey Primer Nick.
As with everything, I read an awful lot, preferably factual material. So I have got literally archive boxes stacked up full of books about, sort of memoirs of air combat and stuff like that from all periods, because they're different, it applies differently. But to know what it's like, and to understand, first of all, to understand the sort of terminology. There are several writers that I've encountered who write brilliantly about the actual nature of air combat, and thinking, right, how can I get that fluidity, that sense of the multiple dimensional stuff that's going on, and the speed and the often lack of visibility, without literally borrowing, say, Vietnam War terms, invents others that we understand how that means. So there is a particular, I don't know, I know it when I see it. I'm reading some of these books. They're all interesting because they all tell you things about what the experience is like, be it from flying biplanes to Spitfires to, lightnings or whatever. But there is a particular turn of phrase. There is a terminology and jargon that I can't use because it's not 40k, but that I can try and replicate to try and give you that sense of authenticity. It's a fake sense of authenticity, but that's what I've always done. So and there's loads of things that I do. I discovered things like this is really silly, but it was early on in the book. I was going, how do you start a jet fighter? And literally, I know the different methods for starting a propeller-driven combat aircraft because I've been growing up with that. But I went, how do you? So I went off and asked people and did some research, and I went, oh, okay, that's how we're going to do that. It's weird. It's odd little stories. Those sort of odd little things where you go, I don't know how these things work because I've never done it. So I've got to imagine myself into it and then read some literature so I can fake it and then fake the faking of it so that I'm glad that it works. But I really wanted to get that sense of the speed, of the G-force, of the various obstacles, just the fact that even bullets don't necessarily go straight when you're pulling massive G, all sorts of things like that to put into a story so it felt authentic.
Yeah,
I always do, but it's particularly noticeable in this because it's a very specific discipline.
I love the idea that you're, getting jet manuals off of eBay. Like, where's the start button? I think,
Oh God, I can show you. I can send you photographs of my book box of book. I mean, there's in fact, I buy reference. I just loads and loads of reference for whatever I'm writing, and quite often that reference goes in a box, and I think, right, I might still need that. And then sometimes reference books that I'll go, right, I finished with that. I have mined that for all it's worth. It's going off to Oxfam or whatever because I don't need it anymore. It's taking up shelf space. I will say this, and take from this what you will. My books of air combat my boxes of books of air combat reference are still in my archive.
Okay. I love hate you. Amazing. So this is a really lovely question. You are alarmingly prolific over several genres and media. Is there any genre you have not or will not write in? That's from Happy Haribo. Alarmingly prolific, Dan.
No, alarmingly prolific. I'm going to add that because it used to be just prolific, but now alarmingly.
Alarmingly.
Yeah. Well, I've justified that to the cows come home before, so I won't do that part. Yeah. Is there anything I would? Well, I never say never. I never thought I would write for the games industry because games are not an integral part of my life the way that books and television and stuff is. But once I started writing for the games industry, I realized that there were enormous pleasures and challenges in doing that, which is why I'm still doing it sort of however many years later as the third hat that I wear. I have for the longest time wanted to work in film and television because I love film and television so much. And I'd love to write movies and I love to write TV shows. and I won't stop. But I have. It's not. It's not that I've been knocking on the door for years and years and years and years. But I have had. There have been so many opportunities come along where somebody said, "Will you write this?" And it's not come to anything because the movie and television industry works in strange ways that are not familiar or rewarding in the same way. I don't mean financially, but just not creatively rewarding in the same way that writing a novel is. So I'm not saying that I would never do that on principle, but I doubt that will now ever happen because I'm sort of tired of the weird way that those things work. Having said that, I'll get an email tomorrow inviting me to write for a show, and then all of that answer will go completely out the window. But I just know that probably because film and television involves the largest budgets because of what they're making, and therefore the largest number of people dependent upon that thing involved in making a TV show or making a movie, that creativity from a writer's point of view gets sacrificed much faster, much quicker. The needs of the show outweigh the needs of the one. You know what I mean? So the kind of, I'm not arguing for great creative integrity on a Warhammer book, for Christ's sake, but but there is some when it's a novel and you're writing it and you want it to be the best book you can be, and then within the bounds of what the 40k IP will allow and what your editor thinks is a good idea and what the proofreader, etc. You know, you can sort of maintain some sense of vision of this is the book that I set out to write. I see, and I know so many people who work in television and film who go, yeah, there's virtually no trace of what I did is left, and that it goes through. So, and again, some of the things that I love about the comics industry, where it is a team sport, and I write a script that is then interpreted by an artist, and that's a wonderful collaborative process. 99% of the time, sometimes it isn't, but 99% of the time, it's a wonderful collaborative process, and we can achieve types of story that I can't do in a novel, which is why I still write things like Brink for 2000 AD and you know, sort of things like that. But that I feel that unless you are a big name showrunner who's also writing their own scripts and have creative oversight of the whole thing, the distance between the writer and writing a script and the end product is so far in television that it's like, well, the money might be good, but I you know, I worry about it. So I don't know. Like I said, I would be delighted to be proved wrong, but but given my maturity and advanced years and the number of years that I've come so close to being involved in things, I'm going, yeah, there's too many other forces pulling away at those sort of things. So there's that, and probably I would never go back and write the Ronald McDonald Happy Meal comic again.
Wow. Oh my God. Look at you dropping that in the end. We'll have to do a whole video on that one.
The 1990s was a dark years.
Thank you for sharing. It's a safe space here. Did the purple monster turn up in it?
Oh yeah, that's a whole nother story. But yeah, I wrote it for several months because I was a freelancer and I was looking for work and I was offered that work, and it was the only one where I went, I don't know if I can do this anymore.
God bless you. I love you so much.
I mean,
right. Let me take you out of that time. We'll throw
to
the Sabbath world. I think this is Will Wellinspector's questions. This is a few, so I'm going to throw them all at you and answer which one you like. Was the World War II vibe of Double Eagle and the Cold War vibe of Interceptor City intentional? Ooh. That's interesting. You picked up Cold War.
Yeah.
Is it a sign of fatigue setting in for the Sabbath World crusade? Was your intention for see, so many people picked up on this. Was your intention for starting the book with a detailed and plausible multi-system mechanical failure to make us all get paranoid right off? And
yes.
What was the inspiration? Yeah. What was the inspiration for that mechanical failure? Probably just your terrible brain.
Yes, it was. But again, if you read a lot of accounts of what air, like World War II air combat or whatever is like, often the deaths are so tragically, it's like it's not the heroic death in the dogfight.
No,
it's a failure of a landing gear to extend properly, or it's a bird strike on takeoff, or it's missing your radar signal and flying into something. It's those sorts of things that happen far too often. And I wanted that idea that, you know, even the great vaunted technology of the Imperium would have, you know, the bulb would fail.
Yeah,
I like that. I like that idea. Interesting Cold War. That's an interesting thing, a very interesting thing, because I suppose it is. There's a much. I think we're aware in Interceptor City much more that it's jet combat. So that there's that. So yes, there is. I mean, like I said, I think of it as very SF combat because it is a very non-real world environment. But there is, and I think if I take it any further, there are other kind of classic genres of air combat that I'd like to look at in terms of how I play around with what the Aeronautica does. But Cold War was a very interesting take, and I would not refute it, even though I hadn't necessarily thought of that.
Yeah.
As to the fatigue of the Sabbath Worlds Crusade, it's not my fatigue.
Oh,
I'm aware that there's an ebb and flow in the history of the way this thing is working, and I have big plans. And I think that with any great campaign, these huge wars, that when things go quiet, or it appears that it's we're now on the inexorable slide towards whatever, there are other things to do. So yes, where that manifests, I'm not entirely sure, but I have big plans about what the way the history of that particular campaign would go.
I thought it seemed to really serve the book, the fact that we were seeing Bree 20 years on and everything, the infrastructure is not as good, things are shaky, things aren't working. There's a scarcity going on.
There is, but that's also on the back of the fact that we know that Gaunt and everybody have just defeated one of the major Arcanate leaders, and there is a sense of victory that the Crusade is moving forward and things are going to get better, and it's just the end game now. We're just going to drive home and finish the thing. So there are those two things. Any long-running campaign, expensive long-running campaign, is going to have that attrition on both sides. It doesn't matter if you sense that you're on the winning side. You're running out of spare parts and water and milk and
all the good things.
All the good things.
So Happy Haribo, he's so naughty. He's had two questions. I think you've answered this. Will you continue to write in the wider Sabbath Worlds territory? I'm really enjoying the expansion beyond Gaunt and the Tanith. That's a nice compliment. And you think?
Well, yes, it is. It is very nice. I'd like to. I think I have certain ideas about what I could do with that. But one of the things I haven't had yet is the idea about having done Titans and having done air combat, and in air combat also armored combat, which, because obviously in Double Eagle there's a whole strand of armored combat which ties back to the Gaunt books as well. I'm going, what else could I do? What is another sort of aspect of warfare that I could do a novel about set in the Sabbath campaign? Because there's so much to know. And would it be served in its own novel that is completely standalone like Double Eagle or Titanicus, or would it be something that would work well in the context of what is now apparently the Jagdeer books or the Gaunt books, or you know what I mean? Yes is in other words. I mean, in a campaign like that where you could take in almost any environment, then you could naturally reflect almost any kind of warfare. So I could do almost anything. We could have a book that's all about military intelligence and code breaking, and it'd be quite fun.
The Sabbath worlds are endless. Historia Jamaldus, how deliberate and pre-planned was the genre warping in Interceptor City from war to mystery to horror, etc.? Also, are you hoping for a 40k mini airplane that can equip a volcano cannon to be produced?
The genre blending, thank you for noticing, was deliberate as much as when I worked out the story I wanted to tell, I realized it was a blend of genres, that it was going to be air combat, but it was also going to be mystery, and it was also going to be horror. And once I got that, I thought, right, those things need to be represented in their own way, and I need to find a way of fusing them together. But I felt that it couldn't just be. I think Double Eagle is essentially an air combat book. It's about the experiences of air combat. So I wanted to bring something different to this and add in extra ingredients. It was deliberate once I'd worked out the story I wanted to tell. Well, the Games Workshop may or may not produce a volcano cannon equipped aircraft for the game or from Forge World or whatever, but that doesn't mean that you can't run to your local Games Workshop or order yourself a Marauder model online and volcano cannon spares from the Titan stuff and build your own. That's what I want to see. The Night Stalker. I want to see it. I haven't made one myself yet, but I've got because I've got Jagdeer's Lightning on my shelf. When I started writing the book, I ordered a lightning strike kit, bought it, glued it together very badly, and then painted it in the colours that she's got it in the same way that I've also got from 20 years ago the Thunderbolt that I made at the same time, so that I could actually pick these things up, have them on my desk, and go, oh, that's what they look like from that angle. So I've got that. So I think, you know, if Night Stalkers return and that's what we get a third book about, and I'm not saying it is, but if it is, I'm going to have to buy myself a Marauder and a volcano cannon and some kit bashing with a scalpel and you know, make some horrific hybrid monstrosity.
I'll get my green stuff ready.
Okay.
Just got 3 questions left. Raja, I had the feeling I've waited for Interceptor City for a really long time. If you had written it closer to Double Eagle, what do you think might have been different?
Well, that time placement. I think the fact that I was aware that I had waited for 20 years to write it, and that I knew that there was going to be a certain proportion of the readership who had read it the first time around. There are lots of people who'd read Double Eagle since, and therefore it didn't seem like such a long wait. But there were people who had been waiting for it.
Yeah.
So I think that was why I deliberately changed the setting, so that the book sort of acknowledged that it was the sort of long-awaited, unexpected sequel. I mean, I think there's she almost says it at some point where she talks about this is the sequel to her career that she didn't think she'd ever have, and that's a knowing nod to everybody who's been waiting since 2004, going, I know, all right. So if you are one of those readers for whom it is they've experienced the 20 years in real time, that was for you. Do you know what I mean? He's acknowledging that commitment and that sense of, oh God, I remember this.
Yeah. That's gorgeous. Thank you. Thank you. Vader Ra 501. For a few years now, Games Workshop has had 40k books set in the new era. Is it because you are the GOAT that you can get away with books set before?
I would love to say yes to that. I think the truth is that I have got 3 or 4 quite well-established, successful series, Sabbath Wells books and Gaunt and Eisenhorn, for instance, that you know, if I write them, people read them, and therefore they're going, well, we can't change the setting here. I would point out, though, and I think this is quite important, that of course, in a completely not Doctor Who way,
yeah,
time in the Warhammer universe and history is extremely malleable because of the warp.
Yes.
So I think there is a genuine sense that although in some chronicles, for instance, the stories of so in the Gaunt books, he refers to Ravenor, who's his favourite writer, as being somebody who'd happened several centuries before.
Yes.
And in the Gaunt books, we think, oh, this is the history of the later Crusades, something that happened several hundred years ago before the current thing. But are they really in relation to each other? You know, I could imagine a new Gaunt book where somebody turns up and said, we've had this communique from the, you know, Lord Gilliman, and Gaunt goes, what do you mean? Because time dilation and the warp, you know, it takes centuries for these things to, you know, and how much impact would it actually have really on, you know, a remote crusade or the individual actions of an Inquisitor over here, to know that actually big things have happened the other side of the galaxy.
Yeah.
Who do they care? You know, I'm still sticking to local dating systems. Thank you very much. You know what I mean? I think it's this year. I don't care what year you think it is. So I think there is an allowance, I think, for these things, because it's not, you know, am I writing historical 40k novels? Probably.
Yeah.
But who knows? I do know, again, one of the books that I have just written, no, both of the books that I have written that I'm not allowed to talk about.
Oh, Dan.
Are not historical 40k.
Okay. Oh, thank you. I really appreciate your NDA-ness, but also your danglingness. Yeah. And the last question is from Aztec Jaguar. He's kind of squished 2 together. Isn't it about time Black Library published a second updated edition of that fancy History of the Sabbath Worlds Crusade book? And when will there be a sequel to Titanicus? I seem to remember the first book seemed to end on a to be continued point rather than a conclusion.
Yes. Now, of course, there has been a second edition of the Sabbath Worlds Guidebook, because the first one was written back in 2000. It was the little paperback one that was out in 2004 or 5 or something like that. Big hardback edition is a revision of that. there will come a point where enough has happened in various stories to warrant revising that yet again. I don't see that being a problem. I see more likely me persuading them to let me do a lovely big deluxe book that's a bit like the Sabbath Wells Guide, but is actually an account of various inquisitorial missions in the Angelus subsector, etc., 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 and therefore investigate the backstory of the Eisenhorn books rather than the Gaunt books, because I don't know how much more we could add to a revised Sabbath Well book. But yeah, at some point, when I've written the next Gaunt arc, maybe we'll do it.
Hurry up, Dan. Come on.
Yeah, I'll just get on with it.
Alarmingly prolific.
And Titanicus, I'd sort of love to write Titanic. I always feel that Titanicus is a much more standalone book than Double Eagle was.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is. I absolutely feel that I could write more Titans stuff, and it would be foolish not to go back to them. But at the same time, that was a sort of, to me, a definitive statement about what I wanted to say about Titans. And I don't know what I don't know what I would do with a Titan novel, much as it would appeal, a second Titan novel, in the way that I absolutely did know what I wanted to do with the second Aeronautica novel. And I think it's probably because we're closer to the personalities of the pilots than we are to the crews. But I don't know. Who knows? Maybe.
Watch this.
Maybe there's just going to be there's going to be a huge Gaunt novel that comes out in which towards the end of the battle the Titans come striding in.
Oh, can you imagine? No.
Jack Deere leads a squadron in to back them up, and Gaunt's going, I know these guys. They've got their own novels.
Wow, Inception is all happening.
Yeah.
I once again, Dan, I could talk to you for like 3 or 4 days around just these 2 books. But thank you so much for the gift of time. Thank you also. I've been reading Miracula behind you. I love that book placement. So thank you so much.
Yes, the books on the shelf behind me in no way bear reference to anything that I might or might not be working on. So there you go. But yeah.
Yeah, you are a walking like escape room mystery, Dan. So we're trying to figure out what you're up to.
Yes, except that every year or so a book is published and it answers all your questions. There you go. So that's the way it works. I am so glad that you enjoyed Interceptor City as much as you did. I really am. Yeah. I'm glad that me recommending and banging on about it as a book that I thought you would like. I knew you'd like Double Eagle, but I'm glad as a book that it proved to be everything and more. Because that kind of vindicates what I thought I was writing at the time, which is quite nice.
In many ways,
it's lovely.
I'm going to go back to it. There's so much in it. I'm looking forward to my reread. You know, when I get a moment, there's just so much. And outside of reading a book, you know, to see that kind of creativity and craft in the writing helps me as a writer. When you read good books, it makes you a better writer. So yeah.
I'd agree with that from my point of view about going out and reading. I always feeding my mind by reading writers that I think are great and seeing what they can do. So that's it. I'm glad you're deriving something. I wouldn't class myself as a great writer, but I'm glad you're reading something there. I think the other thing is that when the end of the Death came out, there was quite a lot of fuss about it because it was such a big deal because it was the end of the Horus Heresy. When Interceptor City came out, a few people said, yeah, I quite like that. And I'm going, well, it'll find its people. But there was not a sense that it had been a big deal in the way that some of the other things that I've written have been. I have just discovered only a week or so ago that it was a massive seller. I didn't realize it had found such a big audience so quickly. So
how did you realize? Did you get a nice royalty check?
I had a conversation with my editor, and they were saying, of course, Interceptor City has been such a huge hit. And I went, has it? Because I haven't had, weirdly, the same sort of feedback on Interceptor City that I've had on doing something very obvious like Horus Heresy. So I am delighted that obviously everybody who was there for the party the first time has come back for the second time, but also that there's a whole new bunch of people coming along going, oh, Aeronautica stuff like this, which is really gratifying and makes me go, Aeronautica, lovely. Yeah. But it's lovely. It's lovely that it's. I was pleased that the book was published and that some people had read it and liked it, but I didn't realise that it was. You know, I don't know if it technically classed as a bestseller, but it was a big hit for Black Library. So that was really nice.
Well, I mean, I'm going to let you go because I've kept you for such a long time, but I am very excited to get to your next book in the Heresy. Have you got any other Dan Abnett recommendations for me that you'd like me to get on to?
Well, what have you got next? You've got...
Where are we now? finished Fear to Tread. I had a lovely chat with James about Sanguinius. So
lovely. So my next one will probably be. Oh, no, we've done No Fear. So the next one will be Unremembered Empire. Must be.
okay.
Which is an interest that's going to be an interesting discussion. That's yes, a very different book, very different. And that's not me in any way saying it's not very good. It is, but there was a lot of heavy lifting at that point in the Horus Heresy, where that book was a pivot on which the whole series had to rotate and realign itself. And it's got some very big characters on it, and it's an interesting book. Interesting book.
I shall hurry up to get there. And thank you again so much. I'll do that thing where I say goodbye and then pause it. Thank you so much once again, Dan Abnett. Appreciate you.
Thank you for having me on. Thank you everybody for tuning in to hear me rabbit on.
Let's fly through skies in a stereo high with Brie from Double Eagle. The odds are good and we're feeling blue with Stims and Boo.